Hey there! Yeah, you! Do you like chess? Are you sick of having to wait your turn? Sure you are! Don't you just hate having to use your brain and think for yourself? Then you're gonna love action chess. No longer turn-based, with action chess it's fastest finger first. Don't you just hate getting the full game on release date? Well, when you purchase action chess, you get this beautiful empty board with 23 playing pieces. For only 9 payments of $9.99 and 2 further payments of $19.99, you get early access to the first 9 playing pieces of action chess. Or make 5 payments of $5.99 down for the first 5 playing pieces, then just 9 weeks of $9.90. Why not buy the Ultimate Edition, which comes with all 32 pieces for 9 satisfaction payments of 99 cents for 99 weeks? Action chess, why it's so simple even a baby could play it. I'm sure you're probably wondering what you've just watched, so I should explain that a little bit. I was going to end the video there, but I want to talk today about one of what I see as one of the biggest problems in gaming today, or I should say that it could become one of the biggest problems if the trend persists. I'm sure you've probably realised from the title of this video, but I am talking about game remakes changing genres and therefore not resembling the original game. I'm specifically talking about Final Fantasy VII here, but this could develop into something else and we'll get into that later. I want to stress at the start of this video that there's a huge difference between a game remake changing genre and a game series changing genre. For you have to really judge each case by its merits, and there are exceptions to that rule. For example, Mario the series changed from being a 2D game to a 3D game, but it's now came full circle and went back to being 2D as well. Other games like Grand Theft Auto, originally it was a 2D top-down view game, but that was more of a hardware limitation thing, same as Mario. So there are exceptions where games can game series is changes and it's not a big deal, but I want to stress that that's not the issue really. The issue here is a game remake changing from one genre to another and therefore just completely making a different game altogether. The second thing I want to stress is that I'm not saying that chess and Final Fantasy are in any way linked from the little piece you watched at the start of this video. I was simply saying that if you take the strategy elements out of chess and you take the turn-based system out of chess, you don't have chess anymore. The game that you now have created, this reimagining of chess, it's not chess anymore. It ceases to be chess. And yet the gaming community is quite happy to take an old game like Final Fantasy VII and just say, oh, we'll just remove most of the rules that make Final Fantasy VII what it is, and then we'll just take them away and add some action elements and it'll be the same game. It's just not the case. It's not the same game and it's not the same experience. So I just want to make that distinction before we go on, because there's just 2 things you want to keep in mind, and it's that a game remake is very different than a game series, a sequel to a game, for example, and the whole chess thing, try not to burn too much energy thinking about that analogy too much. And you may ask yourself, well, if it's just happening for Final Fantasy VII, what's the big deal? It's just one game. How can this affect the entire industry? You have to remember that there's another game in development right now by Capcom called Resident Evil 2, the remake of it, and all Capcom have to do is look at what Square's doing with Final Fantasy and just say, well, you know what, if they can just change the genre, then why don't we just make Resident Evil 2 an action game? And that's a huge fear I have. I mean, there's not really much information on it, and I don't want to go into too much detail on Resident Evil 2 because there isn't any detail to go into, but we do know that it's happening with Final Fantasy, and if this is a trend that continues, like the trend that we see where sequels, like there's so many, I've got like a list of sequels that we'll get to later that just change genre completely, And if this trend continues in remakes, I do think it's something to worry about. Another thing is, I don't want to come across as being like salty because I'm like this huge Final Fantasy fan and I'm like this fanboy that's going on a rant because it's not the same as it used to be and all this here, and I want it the way it was when I first played it. I've never played Final Fantasy VII. I've never really played many of the Final Fantasy games, and I just constantly, anytime I look up a top 10 games of all time, and my friends constantly tell me, you need to play Final Fantasy VII, and I think Final Fantasy VIII gets quite a lot of praise. And I've never experienced, I missed out on it at the time. I guess I was playing something else, and I do like turn-based games. So when I heard this was being remade, I thought, this is great, this is going to give me the opportunity to play a game that I've never got to play originally. And but now I'm just not even interested anymore because it's not going to be like what the original game was. And I used to think that people didn't care about Resident Evil turning from survival horror to action was because they never played the original games. And that's just wrong, because I never played the original Final Fantasy, but I want to still play it as it was. And then the next thing that people may ask or may say, well, why don't you just go back and play Final Fantasy VII? There's nothing stopping you from doing that. It's very different to go back and play a game that you didn't originally play and appreciate it for what it is at the time. For example, a friend told me that there's a part in Final Fantasy VII, I think it was it, where there's like, you climb a huge mountain, a snowy mountain, and it's just this epic part of the game. Now, I've been playing Legend of Zelda since it came out a few weeks ago, and climbing up Death Mountain was really epic. And what my worry is that I would go back and play it, not having any real context, not remembering the time period it was made, and I could just brush right past parts like that and not really appreciate them for what they were. Groundbreaking at the time, but at this time they're not that groundbreaking, and I might not appreciate it. Whereas if I had some sort of nostalgia for it, I could probably remember how epic that was when I first played it. I don't have that, and that's part of why I thought if it was being remade and made into modern day graphics but keep the core gameplay the same, that's what I was excited for, and that's all changed now. Let me just draw another analogy. Imagine if George Lucas or Disney or whoever has the rights decided to remake Star Wars, the first Star Wars. Let's remake the original, and but let's not make it sci-fi. I mean, who needs sci-fi? The genre doesn't really matter. Let's just change genre. How about we make it a romantic comedy, and rather than being set in the future, let's set it in modern day New York. Now, wouldn't that be great? Have the original characters but set it in modern times in New York. Wouldn't that be great? You could call it Finding Love in All the Wrong Places. I have to credit my friend Greenfire 32 for designing that poster. That was pretty funny. But there's a few problems I see with Star Wars being changing genre and Final Fantasy. The first is that it could take away from the original series. A lot of people argue this point. I'm not really too worried about it because I'm a bit more pragmatic than that. I just want to play something that's similar to the old one. But people, you could argue, and it's pretty accurate to say that if you remake it differently from the old game, it's going to undermine everything that came before it in the original series, and it's just going to play differently. So I do think that it could undermine it, but that's an argument I wouldn't really tend to shy away from. The second point is, and this is probably more where I'm coming from, is that people who would have played the new remake or watched the new Star Wars remake, they may write the rest of the series off. They may go and watch Finding Love in All the Wrong Places and think, this is terrible, this isn't what I like at all, I wanted a sci-fi film, or I wanted this, or I wanted that. And they'll just think, well, I'm not going to go and watch the rest of the Star Wars films, having not seen them before, because it's probably just going to be as rubbish as this remake was. And that's worrying, because it changes people's mind on what the rest of the games were like. And I think remakes should be included. I love games like, for example, Halo Anniversary, where you can change between the old and new graphics. I think that is perfect. If you can do it seamlessly, where you can see somewhere and think, I wonder what that looked like in the original version, and you can just, on the switch of a button, see what it used to be like. I think that's key, because it's preserving the game, and it's also given new people a chance to see what the old one was like, but while being able to enjoy the new version. I think that's a perfect example. I don't think that it has to be like that every time. I don't think you should always have to do that. But I do think there should be maybe something included where you can at least see what the old one was like. There was a pretty good Metal Gear collection where you could go back and play the old Metal Gears, like the original ones, and that's nice being able to preserve that, because it's obviously difficult to go and get your hands on an original copy unless you're illegally pirating it or something like that. So that's what I think it should be key to these remakes. The original should be preserved, and there should be some way of accessing it too. And the third point I'd like to make is, if you're going to remake a game, then remake a game. Don't just create a completely different version of a game and then call it the same thing just because you're cashing in on the fans, because you know that they'll buy it. You might as well create a new IP if you're going to make such drastic changes to the gameplay and stuff like that. So that's what really bothers me. I don't understand why you would do that. Here's a so-called reimagining of GoldenEye. This is more a remake of a Call of Duty game with a GoldenEye skin than it is a remake of GoldenEye 007. But at least it's first person. At least it's a first person shooter. That's one thing that it has in common with the original game. It's the only thing it has in common. Calling it a remake of GoldenEye is an insult, but at least they kept the genre the same. It really blows my mind where someone will take a game and change the genre but yet still call it a remake. I just can't stress that enough. And this really... By the way, I didn't buy this game when it came out. I knew this was going to be a buggy piece of well, I knew it wasn't going to be anything like GoldenEye. It's probably an okay game if you come into it not knowing anything about GoldenEye and not having your childhood crushed by trying to remake it and not really remaking it. So it's probably an okay game. I bought this specifically for a video that I plan on making in the future, and I would recommend, if you are in any way unsure of an upcoming remake, don't buy it just because of the name. If you think there's something about it, don't buy it. I bought this one in a second-hand store for nothing, so Activision won't see any of that money, which I'm happy about. And I don't want to keep coming back to Resident Evil 2 because I've made other videos about it and my point's been made in them videos, but yeah, part of me making this video is fear of what is going to happen to Resident Evil 2. I could wake up tomorrow and read the news and it'll say, oh, Resident Evil 2 is a fixed camera angle game and it's going to be survival horror, and that's it. I'll be happy. But I would hate to say I told you so, but I really do worry that Capcom is going to change genre on us here because of the fan remake was over the shoulder camera angle and stuff. It remains to be seen. I'm not going to talk too much more about it. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the Final Fantasy remake. I think it's a terrible mistake to not treat it as the original game, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, maybe you played the original and you want to see the changes. Maybe you're happy with the action elements that are being brought into it, and you like the update. I mean, the whole episodic thing, I was trying to make a point in that in the first part of this video where I was talking about the chest, where like you can buy all these parts of it, like $9.99 for the first week, and then maybe the next month you get another part. Episodic releases are ridiculous to me. I mean, that's a whole other video, but even that's bugged me. I mean, I heard once the news started coming out about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it was like, it's going to be episodic, it's going to be action based. I'm just like, none of this interests me. Why are they doing any of this? But I'd like to hear your opinion on it, because there's a wider issue here where sequels in general, I mean, I'm going to put a list of game sequels and I'll maybe read through a couple of them in a minute. But this is an issue that's going on in gaming, where games just change genre, and it's really bugged me. And I think you have to judge each game on its merits. There's a lot of factors to consider, and I'd like to hear your take on it, because the games you've played and the sequels you've played to them will be different to what I've played. So please do comment. I'm going to leave this video on goldenagegamers.com and on the forum goldenagegaming.com. So please, or even comment on YouTube, wherever you can comment. I'd love to know, because I'd like to do a follow-up video to this with some of the comments, and try and sort of attack this issue as a group as opposed to just me, because I don't think I can do this on my own. It's such a big topic. I've put together a small list of games that I'll put together in an article, that have changed genre. These are sequels that have changed genre. I don't know if I mentioned this at the start of the video, but I can't actually name any other remake that has changed genre, which is why I think this is so important. This is the first time, certainly the first time a big game has changed genre that has been remade. And if you can name another one, please comment with that as well. But I've had a huge list, or there is a huge list of games sequels that have changed genre, and feel free to tell me some that I'll put a link to the list. But some that come to mind: survival horror action. We've got Dino Crisis 1 going to Dino Crisis 2. Obviously Resident Evil 0 going to Resident Evil 4. That was the big one for me, and I've made lots of videos about that. But then we also have games like Parasite Eve, that went from the first one being an RPG to going to a survival horror. Now that was a strange jump. And then there's obviously loads and loads of like games that were originally 2D that went to 3D, and that's just due to hardware limitations. And I don't think anyone would have much of a gripe about that, especially if they eventually make more 2D ones. So for example, Duke Nukem was originally a 2D game. Fallout was obviously originally a 2D game. Fallout 3 then became a first-person game, and they're all now first-person. And there's a lot of stealth to action games. Metal Gear Solid, well, maybe not a lot, but Metal Gear Solid was there was like Revengeance came out and it went to action. There's also a new co-op game, I can't remember what it's called. There's a new co-op Metal Gear. Obviously Hideo's left Konami, but the new one's going to be an action game. I feel that the Splinter Cell series went from, there was definitely an action release in between there, but it's kind of, I think Blacklist pulled it back a bit to, it's more stealth. And also Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, it completely changed. The recent Ghost Recon Wildlands, I think it was called, I played, the beta of it was rubbish. It was like an open world action game. There felt like there was no tactical elements to it, there was no stealth to it. And everything's just, a lot of games turn to action, I've found. But those are just a few examples I'd like to give on that. I mean, that's a separate issue. I do think I want to point that, stress that again. I stressed it at the start of the video. This is a separate issue. Remakes and series or sequels, they're both equally bad, or I think probably the remakes worse, but they should be treated separately, because there's so many variants to it, and that's why I really want your help. I want you to give me your perspective. I want to read what you guys think about this. Do you think it's a big deal that games change genre? Do you think it's any worse that a remake's doing it? And just give me your experience of games maybe you played as a child, or whenever you played them and you loved, and then all of a sudden they changed genre, and let me know what that experience was like, because there's a lot going on here and I want to do a follow-up video. So please do comment, and thanks for watching this video. I know it's probably a bit long, but hopefully I'll do a follow-up, and we'll see where this leads to. So thank you for watching, and let me know what you think.